It started with a broadcast, sleek, sterilized, and blindingly bright. 70 Earth females executed today for acts of sedition against the Galactic Accord, announced the crystalline voice of the anchor, her sapphire-toned skin shimmering beneath studio lights. A strong message to all who would harbor rebellion. The screen behind her cycled through sanitized visuals, neat rows of unmarked coffins, drones hovering in precision, an orbital station detaching the cryo chamber, holding what remained of the human prisoners. No faces, no names, just the number 70. In Sector 12, Commander Vrek watched from the comfort of his command terrace. His third eyelid flicked lazily over slitted pupils. Humans and their obsession with memorials, he said, swirling a glass of thick amber brine. They breed emotion like a fungus. You think they'll respond? Asked Yuvo, the new intern. Frog-like, wide-eyed young. Too young to understand how wars actually end. Vrek scoffed, the gills on his neck flexing. Respond? They'll sob, light a few candles, and write a protest song. Maybe send a petition. But a war? Against us? Please. The laugh he gave was dry and certain. And in that certainty lived the first mistake. Down on Earth, somewhere off-grid in what was once Wyoming, a man moved quietly through a kitchen. He folded a letter slowly, as if it were something living, then tucked it into a small metal tin already half-filled with dog tags, wedding rings, and a spent bullet. The man wore simple clothes, plain gray shirt, canvas pants. Dust clung to his boots. Sunlight caught the jagged edge of a scar across his temple. His name was Boone, just Boone, and at that moment he was pouring coffee. A breeze passed through the open screen door. The wind carried birdsong, distant ordinary things. The room behind him was spare. A wooden table with only one chair. A coat rack with a long black coat. Above it, a flag, tattered, American, hung carefully, not with pride, but memory. Boone didn't say much, not aloud, but his eyes moved across a file laid open beside the coffee. Names, transmission logs, execution times. Cross-referenced with rebel networks. Tag numbers from the executed. Line 67. Boone's hand lingered over it. Then, with infinite gentleness, he tore the page from the file and slid it into the tin. He closed it. That was all. Back in orbit, aboard the diplomatic deck of the Galactic Embassy, bureaucrats celebrated. Toasts were made in thick dialects. To peace. To deterrence. To compliant colonies. One of the lords, a wiry Zarnithian with gossamer wings folded like origami behind his back, leaned toward Vrek with amusement. "You know what I heard," he whispered. "One of them was married." Vrek raised an eyebrow. "Married, indeed, to a human male. A soldier, I think." Her file said Boone. That was the surname. Vrek smiled. Then she was clearly unstable. The laughter that followed was indulgent, smug. They didn't fear Earth, not truly. Earth was a trading partner, an emotional species, unpredictable but manageable. Good for markets, poor for warfare. They marry with ceremony, one said, like it matters. Love makes them vulnerable, another agreed. That word, love, drew out a ripple of condescension. It was a quaint superstition, like rain dances or tribal drums. They'd studied human psychology, charted their rise, measured their wars. They believed they understood us. Boone arrived quietly. No escort. No flourish. He stepped from the shuttle alone, duffel bag over his shoulder, long coat brushing his boots. His beard was short, clean. His eyes tired. But he smiled. "Afternoon," he said to the customs droid. The droid scanned him. "Declare species. Human. Origin. Earth. Purpose. To collect what's left." There was a pause, almost like a glitch. "Specify. My wife was executed last week. She was one of the 70. Names in your logs." The droid tilted. "Reason for retrieval. Closure." After a pause, the gate hissed open. He walked through like it meant nothing. Like the very air hadn't just stiffened around him. Inside the grand hall, he was greeted by a receptionist with scaled hands and breath that stank faintly of copper. She gestured for him to sit. He didn't. Instead, Boone looked up at the massive chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It shimmered with solar glass, polished and ceremonial. "You ever wonder," he said softly, "how much weight that thing can hold?" The receptionist blinked. "Excuse me." "Just thinking aloud. It's beautiful. Would be a shame if it ever came down." The silence afterward stretched too long. She typed something quickly. Boone waited. Eventually Vrek arrived. Still smug. Still perfectly pressed in ceremonial robes. "Ah, Earth's grieving emissary. You're earlier than expected." Boone nodded. "I tend to be. May I offer my condolences?" "No need. You already gave me something else." Vrek raised a brow. "What's that?" "Proof." There was a beat. Then Boone smiled. "But since I'm here, I'd like to request access to your execution records. Just to confirm her presence. You understand? It's unusual, but not illegal." Vrek tapped something into a tablet. "I'll have them sent to your suite." Boone's eyes drifted to the tablet. "You keep logs on personal terminals?" "Only the routine ones." "Smart." The two stood a moment longer in silence. Boone adjusted the strap on his duffel bag. "Well then, I won't waste your time. I just want ashes, Commander, not blood." He turned, stopped, then looked back. "You ever heard of the Appalachian War?" Vrek shook his head. Boone nodded. "Didn't think so." And he walked away. Back in his suite, Boone waited until the door sealed. Then he opened the duffel. Inside were two things: a folded cape, patterned in stars and stripes, and a small, cube-shaped emitter. He placed it on the floor. It blinked once, then once more. From deep inside the cube, a signal pulsed, tight beam, quantum encoded, invisible to local scans. A message, already pre-written, fired into the cold void between galaxies. Its content was simple. Confirm. She's dead. Permission to proceed. Boogeyman. On Earth, the signal was received. On Mars, weapons platforms awakened. And in the belt, a fleet uncloaked. Boone stood alone by the viewport as distant stars shimmered like broken glass. He stared for a long time, not speaking, not moving. Only after the stars began to drift did he whisper one name, then reached into the coat pocket and pulled out a ring. The glass behind him reflected his face, calm, unreadable. But if anyone had looked close, they would have seen the subtle twitch at the corner of his eye. Not sadness, not pain, something worse. Awaiting. Just outside the door, a junior envoy watched him through the feed, uneasy. He turned to his superior. "Sir, the human, he's not crying." "No. No. He's still." The superior waved him off. They mourned differently. But the envoy, younger, sharper, and more human sympathetic, didn't let it go. "Sir, what if we killed someone important? We kill important people all the time. But this one wore a ring." The superior paused. Thought. "Wives," he said slowly, "can be replaced." And inside the suite, Boone turned slightly, as if he'd heard. He hadn't. But his hand, now wearing the ring, curled into a fist. And across the galaxy, Earth's fleet adjusted its course. Not toward battle, but retribution. And this time, there would be no survivors. The shuttle hissed open with a whisper of pressurized air, and the man who stepped out looked like he belonged somewhere simpler, maybe on a front porch with a cup of coffee, not on the polished obsidian floors of the Galactic Embassy's central rotunda. He wore a long black coat that brushed his boots when he walked, and a wide-brimmed hat tilted just enough to cast a shadow across his eyes. There was something oddly humble about him, like he might apologize for tracking dust across the tiles, even as he planned to burn the place down. His name, according to the manifest, was Boone. No rank, no title, just Boone. He walked slowly, like he had all the time in the world. An escort of 2 Grelchian officers flanked him with suspicion baked into every step. Their silken robes shimmered with every motion, claws tapping against the floor like typewriter keys. The taller one glanced at Boone's duffel bag and muttered something in native clicks. The other replied with a grunt and what might have been a nervous swallow. Boone noticed, but didn't comment. He simply smiled, a little too wide, the kind of smile that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. Inside the chamber, dozens of species moved like a coral reef, shimmering robes, fluttering limbs, voices that resonated from gills or antennae or throats lined with cartilage. Diplomatic representatives of 17 sectors gathered for what was meant to be a routine debrief, a political formality to acknowledge the reduction of human rebellion. Boone was not on the agenda, but he had a seat. He took it without waiting for permission. Vrek noticed him immediately. The commander had the posture of a man used to being obeyed and the expression of one who had never been punched in the jaw. He wore ceremonial violet armor polished, so brightly it reflected the light above into his own slitted eyes. "You're early," Vrek said without rising. "I like to beat traffic," Boone replied, removing his coat with unhurried ease. "Also, I didn't want to miss your opening remarks. I hear you're quite the orator." Somewhere behind them, a nervous Grelchian dropped a datapad. The sound echoed more than it should have. Vrek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're here for the remains, I'm told." Boone nodded. "That's right. We didn't keep them. The cleansing was total." "I figured." Boone paused, then added, "But I still need documentation. Verification. A death without proof is just a rumor, and I got too many of those in my head already." "You suspect we're lying?" "No, Commander. I suspect you don't care. Which is worse?" That stopped the room for a beat. A Yelvani interpreter at the edge of the table shifted her eye stalks away from Boone's face. A Thux ambassador adjusted his breathing mask. Even the air filtration hummed louder, like the station itself knew something was wrong. Boone leaned forward, resting his elbows gently on the obsidian table. "Just want the paperwork. And some quiet. Then I'll leave." Vrek tapped something into his tablet. "You'll have access to our internal logs. Nothing redacted." "I appreciate that." Boone didn't look grateful. He looked like a man holding back a storm. The conversation drifted elsewhere: new tariffs, border enforcement, the recent mutiny on a moon colony. Yet Boone sat through it all, smiling faintly, nodding occasionally, like he was collecting data he didn't even need. Every now and then, his hand would move to the edge of his coat, adjusting something unseen. No one asked about the duffel bag. When the session broke for adjournment, Boone moved with silent precision. Not hurried, not slow measured. Like every step was part of a metronome ticking toward something. In the hall outside the chamber, the young intern from earlier, Yuvo, intercepted him. The frog-like alien looked nervous, eyes flicking between Boone and the security cameras. "Sir," Yuvo said cautiously, "if I may, I'm sorry about your wife." Boone studied him for a moment. "You may. And thank you. I reviewed her file." Boone stopped walking. Yuvo's voice faltered. "She wasn't a soldier." Boone's jaw tensed, but his voice stayed calm. "No. She was a gardener." Yuvo blinked. "A gardener?" "She used to grow things, especially in places they weren't meant to grow." The intern swallowed. Commander Vrek said she was a rebel." "She planted ideas," Boone said softly. "Some of them even bloomed." He looked down the hall, where polished statues of peacekeepers lined the walls like trophies. Then back at Yuvo. "Tell me, son, have you ever lost someone who made the world make sense?" Yuvo didn't answer. Boone nodded anyway. "Didn't think so." He turned, stepping into the diplomatic wing with a silence that somehow made more noise than footsteps ever could. His suite was modest by galactic standards: stone floors, curved walls, embedded lighting with 4 ambient settings. Boone adjusted none of it. Instead, he placed the duffel bag on the bed and opened it. He didn't reach for weapons. Not yet. What he removed instead was a small metal lunch tin. He opened it like a contained glass, and inside was a folded photograph, a wedding ring, and a flower pressed so carefully between paper it still held a hint of scent. He sat at the edge of the bed and stared at the photo for a long while. She had freckles. In the photo, she was laughing mid-sentence, a dandelion seed caught in her hair. Boone let the silence breathe. Then he unfolded the second layer of the bag. A polished data spike. Earth issue. He inserted it into the room console and waited. No encryption. No stealth. Just a single file. Operation Red Harvest. Infiltration complete. Awaiting final trigger. He stared at it, didn't touch it. Instead, he turned off the screen and stood again. He walked to the window. The stars outside pulsed slow and blue. The light filtered through the embassy's protective glass. Then his fingers brushed something in his coat pocket. The ring. Still warm. His smile faded. Just for a moment. Then came the knock. 3 quiet taps. Sharp. Rhythmic. Boone opened the door. It was Vrek. The commander didn't wait for invitation. Just checking to see if your suite meets Earth standards. It's got a bed and a ceiling. I ain't hard to please. Of course, Vrek said, stepping in. I just wanted to say, officially, no one took pleasure in the executions. They were simply necessary. Boone stared. Vrek shifted. I know how you humans grieve. Fire. Violence. Music. You're a dramatic species. Boone tilted his head. You ever been to Appalachia, Commander? Vrek frowned. No. There's a tradition there. If someone kills your kin, you don't howl. You don't curse. He stepped forward, closing the distance. You invite them to dinner. Vrek blinked. I don't. Boone's smile returned, slow and deliberate. And when the food's on the table and the fire's burning and everyone's got a drink in hand, that's when you start carving names. He held the commander's gaze. Enjoy your evening, sir. Vrek left. Quickly. When the door shut, Boone turned back to the console and opened the file again, awaiting final trigger. He hovered a finger over the command. Didn't press. Not yet. Instead, he picked up the photo again and whispered her name. Just once. Like a prayer. The lights in the room dimmed slightly. And outside, the first Earth ship dropped into orbit. Undetected. Silent. The trigger hadn't been pressed yet. But the table was being set. The gardens of Sector 12's Memorial Ring were quiet at first light. Not peaceful, quiet. There's a difference. Peace is earned. Quiet is a warning. Boone walked slowly through the perimeter path, hands behind his back, coat fluttering slightly in the filtered wind. Beneath his boots, the hex-tile stones shimmered with embedded names, etched memorials to every traitor the Empire had cleansed. 70 of them had been added last week. 70. His fingers brushed the edge of a bench as he passed, then paused beside a tree the aliens had imported from the Terran archives. It was a birch, artificially rooted in nutrient gel. Leaves flickered silver in the wind, too symmetrical to be real. A holographic plaque buzzed to life as he stood beside it. In memory of the rebalanced. Order requires sacrifice. Boone knelt beside the trunk and reached into his coat. From a small pocket, he drew a paper-wrapped parcel, creased at the edges. He placed it carefully against the base of the tree. Inside was a sachet of Appalachian soil, and a ring that no longer fit. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He only stood again and walked away without looking back. Above him, high on the orbital ring's security catwalk, Commander Vrek stood watching, hands clasped behind his back. His breathing was tight. His lower mandible twitched every time Boone paused. Vrek turned to the officer beside him. How long has he been down there? 42 minutes, sir. Has he interacted with any local security? No, sir. But we did trace unauthorized micro-beacon activity near the eastern perimeter. Vrek's brow furrowed. Micro-beacons. Standard human tactical implants. Low-frequency bursts. Hard to track, harder to scrub. Vrek's gills twitched. How many? 6. Maybe 7. A silence fell between them. Do you know who he is, sir? The officer asked, hesitantly. Vrek didn't answer immediately. He only exhaled long and slow before finally muttering. They used to call him Widowmaker, back in the Iridian collapse. But he's a diplomat. Everyone's something on paper. Vrek turned away from the window. Track him, he said. But don't touch him yet. Back on the path, Boone passed another curved wall etched with alien glyphs. His eyes didn't flicker across the text. He already knew what it said. In the days before the execution, his wife had sent him everything she could. Smuggled messages on bakery receipts, blood-scanned fingerprints, even whispered recordings of the cells before they were gassed. They'd killed her before she finished the final message. But she'd said enough. Boone paused again, this time by a small pond, where mirrored water shimmered in the morning haze. A few alien diplomats sat nearby, sipping fermented nectar and discussing market trends. One of them, a sleek Harkin female with mirrored skin and no mouth, glanced at him. Boone nodded politely. She shivered. He moved on. In a hidden recess beneath the bridge, Boone knelt again. From beneath the flag-stitched lining of his coat, he drew a small tool, no bigger than a finger, and pressed it against the bridge's support pillar. It blinked once. Then, again. He stood. It was the last of the 7 beacons. And now the coordinates were set. His walk back to the central dome was slower, not because he was tired, but because he was listening. The air was different now, not louder, not even quieter, just watching. He could feel the shift in atmosphere, the minute recalibrations of the surveillance drones, the way the embassy guards adjusted their stances, the change in rhythm beneath his feet. The machine had realized it was bleeding, and now it wanted to know where. Boone reached his suite just before the midday bell. Inside, a datapad blinked with a message. Request, meet with Earth Command Proxy AI. Encrypted channel. 1400 hours confirm. He tapped confirm. Then, without ceremony, walked to the kitchenette and made tea. The AI arrived promptly. Its voice came through the room's central comms, soft, clipped, neutral. Agent Boone. Earth Command acknowledges confirmation of beacon set. Awaiting authorization for primary sequence. Boone sipped his tea. What's the delay? Galactic diplomacy protocols. Earth must maintain the illusion of ignorance until diplomatic immunity expires. 46 hours remain. Understood. A pause. Then the AI asked, do you require psychological assistance? Boone didn't answer. The silence stretched. Then he said, just her name. Raina, the AI replied. Raina Boone. Age 34. Civilian status. No recorded offenses. Execution number 67 of 70. He closed his eyes. Thank you. Would you like to play her last message? No. The AI fell silent again. Then, you are authorized to initiate soft sequence within current window. Earth acknowledges that vengeance is classified as tactical morale operation. Boone chuckled. A sound without humor. You called it vengeance. Informally. He stared out the window. It's a favor, he said softly. The AI didn't respond. Boone reached for the duffel bag. Inside were only 3 things now. His cape, his weapons, and a small notebook filled with handwritten names. He strapped the knife sheath to his ankle, the pistol holster beneath his left arm, then clipped the final piece to his belt, a matte black key the size of a thumbnail. It was warm to the touch, his wife's DNA embedded in its core. Authorization key for the Widowmaker protocol. He placed the cape on the bed, but didn't put it on yet. Not yet. At 1600 hours, there was a soft chime at his door. Boone opened it to find Yuvo, the frog-like intern, standing there with a nervous datapad and a pale expression. Sir. Hi. Boone nodded. Come in. Yuvo shuffled inside, antenna twitching. I reviewed the death logs. They, Commander Vrek said to delete them after your visit. But I kept a copy. Boone looked up, quiet. Why? Yuvo swallowed. Because she wasn't supposed to be in that group. She wasn't registered for transport that day. Her file was altered. Boone's voice dropped. By who? Vrek, Yuvo whispered. He bumped her onto the list at the last second. Boone stood very still, then reached over and tapped the datapad, bringing up the altered logs. There it was. Execution 67. Raina Boone. Not a mistake. A message. Yuvo's voice cracked. I don't understand. Why her? Boone looked at him. She brought me flowers once, he said. Yuvo blinked. Sir. Back when I came home from a long mission. The war had just ended. We were still scraping our men out of escape pods. I'd seen things, done things that should have shattered me. But when I stepped off that ship, she didn't ask what happened. She didn't say she was proud. She just handed me a basket of fresh violets. Said, I made you something green again. Boone turned to the datapad. She was innocent. She was kind. And they turned her into a lesson. He gently closed the pad. Yuvo stepped back. Boone's voice, when it came again, was soft. You should go now. I didn't mean to. Boone turned and looked him in the eyes. Yuvo, go home. Tonight. Pack. Get on a shuttle. Don't come back here tomorrow. The intern stared at him, shaking. Then left. Boone stood alone in the room. He picked up the cape, slid it over his shoulders, fastened it across his chest. Stars and stripes. Colorless under alien light, but burning bright in memory. He reached into the duffel one last time and pulled out a sealed card. On the back, Raina's fingerprint. On the front, a simple inscription. This ain't a war. It's a reminder. Boone tapped it against the side of the console. And all across the embassy, small, invisible machines began to wake. In the hallway, outside, the temperature dropped 2 degrees. And high, in orbit, the Earth fleet finally got the ping they'd been waiting for. Primary trigger. Verified. Coordinates locked. And somewhere deep beneath the stars, the Widowmaker came home. The first building fell at 4:17 standard orbit time. No warning. No breach alarm. No traceable energy signature. One moment it stood 35 stories of crystalline galactic bureaucracy, and the next it was a soft blue cloud, collapsing inward like a folded memory. Ambassador Boone was already walking. The star-spangled cape trailed behind him, the fabric heavy with Earth silence. His boots struck the marble floor in measured steps. Not fast, not urgent, but inevitable, like time catching up to a lie. Emergency klaxons started 4 seconds later. By then, he'd already passed through 2 security gates. Neither registered his presence. The embassy's defense grid was scrambling, trying to reconcile an internal system's collapse with an external silence. There were no ships attacking, no energy readings, just failure. Inside the command chamber, Vrek spun toward the central display. His face glistened with sweat. Get me a scan. All sectors. I want. Sir, someone cut in, trembling. The disruption is surgical. Only Earth-aligned terminals are compromised. And those 7 energy signatures from earlier. Where are they now? Converging. The display bloomed with red spirals, 7 points blinking into formation, forming a circle around the central council chamber. At its center, the human. Vrek blinked. He's here. Walking through sector core, the technician said, voice cracking. No resistance. Why? A pause. Then, quietly, because no one wants to be the one who tries to stop him. Vrek opened a private channel, sealed the chamber. Now, Boone stood before the council doors when the final lock clicked shut. He didn't flinch, just raised his hand and slid the command key into a small indent by the frame. A hiss, then a blink. Then the doors opened, against every protocol. The council chamber was wide, circular, glass-walled, with 12 representatives seated in tiered rows. Behind them, galaxies spun slowly on panoramic screens. It had been designed to inspire awe. Boone didn't look up. His eyes stayed on the High Chancellor. I expected more guards, he said. The Chancellor, an ethereal being who spoke in 5 tones simultaneously, stared with genuine confusion. You should not be here. Boone nodded. That's true. Vrek burst in from the rear entrance, weapon raised. Boone, stand down. Boone didn't even glance at him. I buried my wife in your soil, he said calmly. Not even your soil. Just the dust you let her burn into. This is an act of war, the Chancellor warned. No, sir, Boone replied. War ends when both sides care who dies. The air trembled. The lights flickered. Boone stepped forward. You thought grief made humans weak. That we'd break, protest, mourn, maybe throw a riot. He tilted his head, eyes calm, voice almost gentle. You forgot what it means to love something enough. The cape fluttered behind him, dirty, torn at the hem. Its stars caught the light. And for the first time, someone on the council noticed that the colors had been stitched not in thread, but in ashes. Raina's ashes. Vrek shouted, fired. Too slow. Boone's hand moved once. A flash of steel. The bullet caught Vrek in the throat. Not fatal, yet, but enough to drop him. The council panicked, rising, shouting, fumbling for shields, for protocols, for something that made sense in the face of a human who refused to explain. "I gave you 70 days, Boone said. One for each woman. The counselor from Sector WRSK hissed. They were traitors. They were wives, daughters, teachers, gardeners, citizens. And one of them, Boone said, his voice tightening, made me remember what life was for. You can't punish an empire for one death, the chancellor said, standing now. Boone looked up, finally meeting his eyes. I'm not punishing you, he said. I'm showing the galaxy what we are when you give us nothing left to lose. He tapped the key, clipped to his belt. Above the council, the screens flickered, then changed. Not stars now. Ships. Thousands. All Earth-marked. Silent. Powered down. Positioned in perfect orbit around the capital ring. A formation too still, too quiet. The chancellor's tones collapsed into one. Impossible. They've been waiting, Boone said. I told them not to fire unless I lit the match. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed letter. Here's my formal resignation. As a diplomat. He said it on the chancellor's dais. I'm nobody now. With that, he turned to Vrek, still gasping on the floor, clutching his neck. Boone knelt beside him. I read her last message, he said, voice low. She asked me not to hurt anyone. Begged me. That's the only reason you're still breathing. Vrek tried to curse, but only coughed blood. Boone nodded. That's all right. You're not meant to understand. He stood. Not yet. A tremor shook the chamber. One of the outer towers collapsed, sending a bloom of silver dust into the sky. Boone didn't look. He walked to the edge of the chamber, past rows of paralyzed counselors. Past shock. Past fury. He stood by the window, eyes fixed on the fleet outside. Then opened a channel. No encryption. No code. Just his voice. This is Boone. A pause. Execute Red Harvest. In orbit, the ships came alive. Not with weapons. With light. Massive screens blinked to life on every hull. Not propaganda. Not threats. Faces. Every woman killed. A name. A smile. A brief quote. And the final one, Raina Boone, spoke. Just one word, captured before her death. Grow. And then, the feeds ended. Boone turned to the room, cape rippling in the rising wind. You thought this was about destruction, he said. But she didn't teach me how to end things. She taught me how to begin them. The lights dimmed once more. Earth's fleet powered down again. Silent. Present. Watching. The message was simple. We remember. We wait. And if needed, we burn. The chamber fell into absolute silence as Boone walked away, his boots echoing like the ticking of an old grandfather clock. No fanfare. No bloodbath. Just the kind of silence that would outlive them all. And in the stars above, 70 names burned softly, like constellations someone had chosen to carve into memory. The cape followed him into the dark.